Let's begin with a little field trip. Not to a museum, but back in time. Picture it, colonial America. We're told stories of powdered wigs and noble ideals of men who fought for liberty. But let's look closer. Who were these men? They weren't just philosophers in fancy stockings. They were the Jeff Bezoses of their day. George Washington, for instance, he wasn't just a general, he was a land baron. He owned a staggering amount of land, and on that land were hundreds of enslaved people, human beings treated as property. Their forced labor generated immense wealth, and this was the foundation of his power. These were the men who shaped a nation, the Founding Fathers, a collection of landowners, merchants, and slaveholders. They were the 1%, the elite. When they talked about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, you have to ask, whose life? Whose liberty? Their happiness was often built on the misery of others. Think of the vast tobacco plantations of Virginia, or the bustling ports of the North, where ships owned by wealthy merchants docked with goods produced by exploited labor. This wasn't a humble startup, it was a corporate merger of powerful interests. Their world was one of stark contrasts. On one hand, you have the gentry living in grand estates discussing philosophy over expensive wine. On the other hand, you have the reality for most people, the indentured servants, the poor farmers, and, most brutally, the enslaved Africans. Their lives were not part of the glorious picture we're often sold. They were the engine of the economy, the human machinery that powered the founders' fortunes. To ignore this is to miss the entire point. The system wasn't accidentally unequal, it was designed that way from the very first brick. So when these men gathered to create a new country, what do you think their top priority was? Universal freedom? A fair shake for everyone? Of course not. Their primary goal was to protect their stuff, their land, their money, their human property. They were building a government, yes, but it was a government that would serve their interests first and foremost. They were creating a framework to ensure that the people with the power and wealth would keep it. This isn't some wild conspiracy theory, it's just reading the minutes of the meeting. The whole enterprise was a masterclass in self-preservation for the rich. Now let's talk about the Constitution. That sacred document. It's held up as a beacon of freedom, but it's also a brilliant piece of legal engineering. One designed to protect the assets of its authors. Think about it. The men who wrote it were deeply worried. They were afraid of the mob, the poor, the landless. They had just seen rebellions where farmers rose up against crushing debt. So, they built a system with checks and balances, not just to limit the power of a king, but to limit the power of the people themselves. It was designed to be slow, to be difficult to change, to prevent the majority from voting to say cancel all debts. Consider the explicit protections for slavery. The 3/5 compromise, for example. It wasn't some enlightened debate, it was a grotesque negotiation. Southern states wanted to count enslaved people to get more political power, but they didn't want to treat them as people. So they settled on counting each enslaved person as 3/5 of a human for representation. This baked the institution of slavery, the ultimate source of wealth for many founders, directly into the nation's DNA. It wasn't a bug, it was a feature. A feature designed to keep the Southern elite powerful. And what about democracy? The founders were terrified of it. That's why they created the Electoral College, a buffer, a safety net to stop the public from directly electing a president they deemed unsuitable. The Senate, originally, was not elected by the people at all. Senators were chosen by state legislatures, which were often controlled by the wealthy. The whole structure was a complex machine. It was built to look like a government of the people, but it had all sorts of emergency brakes and trapdoors, all designed to stop the public from getting too much power and threatening the established order. So the next time someone tells you the Constitution was created to give everyone freedom, you can politely say, "That's a lovely thought, but have you read the fine print?" It was a document for its time, written by the men of its time. And those men were rich, they were powerful, and they were very, very good at looking after number one. They created a government strong enough to protect their commercial interests and property rights from foreign powers, and also insulated enough to protect them from the democratic impulses of their own citizens. It was, in many ways, the ultimate contract for the preservation of the elite. Fast forward to today, July 27th, 2025. The powdered wigs are gone. The plantations have been replaced by skyscrapers. But has the game really changed? Or have the players just updated their uniforms? The colonial landowners and merchants have become corporate CEOs, Wall Street bankers, billionaire tech moguls. They don't own people in the same way, no, but they own the systems that control people's lives. They own the companies we work for, the banks that hold our debt, the media that shapes our thoughts. The fundamental power dynamic is shockingly familiar. Look at the modern economy. A worker at a massive warehouse is pushed to their physical limit for low wages, with their every move tracked by a computer. Their labor makes the company's founder fantastically wealthy enough to fly to space for fun. Meanwhile, that worker might be struggling to afford rent or put food on the table. A student takes on crippling debt for a college degree. A degree they were told was the key to a good life. But now, they're trapped, paying off a loan for decades to a financial institution that profits from their ambition. This is the modern version of indentured servitude. And what about justice? If a regular person is accused of a minor crime, they face a system that can crush them. Public defenders are overworked, bail can be impossible to afford, and one mistake can ruin a life. But if a billionaire is caught in a massive financial scandal, or a corporation pollutes an entire town's water supply, they have armies of lawyers. They pay fines that are just a rounding error in their profits. They get deferred prosecution agreements. It's a completely different justice system, one for the rich and one for the rest of us. The name on the building has changed, but the architecture of power remains. The parallels are chilling. The old elite used their control of land and labor to write the rules. The new elite use their control of capital and information to do the same. They fund political campaigns. They lobby lawmakers to create favorable regulations and tax loopholes. They own the platforms where we get our news. They have perfected the art of making the system work for them, just as their predecessors did. The core truth remains. America was built on a foundation of elite control, and that foundation has been renovated and redecorated, but never truly torn down. And now for the main event, modern politics. The spectacular show that keeps us all distracted. We are encouraged to pick a side, red or blue, left or right. We argue with our neighbors and our families over cable news talking points. We are consumed by the outrage of the day. And while we are busy fighting each other, who is really winning? Who benefits when we are all at each other's throats? The very same people. The corporate donors, the financial giants, the defense contractors. They play both sides like a fiddle because their power doesn't depend on who wins an election. Think about it. When a politician promises to be tough on Wall Street, who funds their campaign? Often, it's people from Wall Street. When another politician promises to lower taxes for the wealthy, claiming it will help everyone, who gets the biggest check? The wealthy, of course. Both parties, in their own ways, often end up serving the same masters. They might disagree on social issues, they might put on a great show of being enemies, but when it comes to the fundamental economic structure, the one that keeps wages stagnant while corporate profits soar, the one that keeps healthcare tied to employment, there's a surprising amount of agreement. This is the illusion of choice. We are presented with a menu that has two options, but both options are cooked in the same kitchen, by the same chef. A patient fighting with an insurance company over a life-saving treatment doesn't care if the company's CEO is a Republican or a Democrat. A family facing eviction doesn't care about the landlord's political affiliation. They just know the system is not working for them. It is a system where the house always wins, and the house is owned by a very small, very powerful group of people. So, what is the answer? It begins by asking the right questions. We need to stop asking, is this policy good for the left or the right? And start asking, who does this policy truly serve? We have to look past the political theater and see the economic reality behind it. The real divide in America is not between Republicans and Democrats. It's between the powerful and the powerless. between those who own the system and those who are trapped within it. It's time to wake up, look up from the puppet show, and finally see who is pulling the strings.